So what does a Vice Provost for Global Strategy do? Well, with reference to this, I have oversight of a couple of on-campus offices that can help you as you go about your work in global health. So one of them is the Office of International Students and Scholars, and the other is the Office of International Affairs. And then I work collaboratively with people from around campus to try and anticipate and hopefully solve some of the issues that people will have as they engage internationally and have to deal with things like payments and how do you actually deal with both our university bureaucracy as well as a complex web of rules and regulations that you're likely to encounter as you work internationally. So you can think of OIA as the Yale State Department. What do? We support the university mission by helping faculty, students, and scholars in their collaborations, programs, and courses of study. And we also have, like, I suppose, the other State Department, when international people come to campus and you're interested in having them welcomed officially in some way by the university and you want help in making arrangements for that, we are here to help you as you try and deal with that. So I'll just give you a couple of examples of things that we do. So in OIA, which is headed by Associate Vice President Don Filer, who's been in that office for 20 plus years, we employ a number of regional specialists, 5 or 6 regional specialists who each are familiar and have deep contacts with other universities, sometimes with governments in different regions of the world. If you come across problems in dealing with governments in a particular region, or you're interested in whether other faculty members have been working on research projects in your particular region, or whether we have contacts with universities in those regions that you are thinking of entering, we're a resource for you. You can contact us, you can contact Don Filer in the office, and we're here basically to help you navigate and put you in contact with other people that may have run research projects in a particular area in the past. We also do things like work on memoranda of understanding with other universities. We work with our colleagues in compliance and OGC on things like that. And as you're thinking about making those kind of arrangements, of course, you can deal with your own dean and school, but we also have a reservoir of knowledge on how these things have worked in the past and what you might want in those kind of agreements, and anticipating various risks and problems that might come up in your project. And then the other office that we have is the Office of International Students and Scholars. And that can be helpful in a problem-solving, anticipatory way that you might not appreciate. So if you're international scholars here in the audience, you'll know that OISS is where you get your visa forms from. And when you come here, there are staff there that work with you as you're trying to think about your particular visa status or what you might do. But they can also be really helpful in another sense. So for instance, at Macmillan, we bring in scholars at risk each year. And sometimes due to war or other kinds of things, getting a US visa appointment somewhere else in the world to come in can be really, really tricky. And Ozan Say and his staff at OISS are just great in having really detailed knowledge of where in the world or which office the wait lines are 3 months long or 6 days long. And in the past, we've actually flown a scholar at risk from Iran to Rwanda because there was no way that this individual could get an appointment. And Ozan and his staff figured out, okay, this is the route in. So most of the time, we're not going to have situations like that. But he and his office can really be helpful in anticipatory visa problem solving, both for people who are here as well as people that you want to bring in. So I will pass things on to my colleague, Carolyn. Marks, I think, are you up next or is it Kristina?
But I think you want to talk about international payments.
Oh yeah, sorry. So international payments. One of the things we have worked on both in Macmillan Center, which I direct, as well as in the office of the Provost, is to try and simplify the very complex rules on international payments that exist. So in Macmillan, it is very frustrating to us. And in departments, sometimes you bring in an individual, you want to process their expenses, you want to reimburse them or pay them an honorarium for a particular thing, and it takes months and months and months, and then it gets kicked back, and then it takes even longer. And it's embarrassing for us when we have colleagues from around the world. We should be doing better on this. Now, there are some international regulations and laws that we can't get away from, that we just have to deal with. But within the limits of that, and with thinking about risk management and fraud risks, we really ought to be doing better, even with bearing those kind of things in mind. So what we've done in the Provost's office is set up, in collaboration with the finance side of the university, an international payments committee. What we've done is basically collect complaints, and there were many, from different parts of the university, and we had about an initial list of 65 or so problems that people had identified with international payments. And some of you, I'm sure, are thinking immediately of the kind of international payment problems you have had. What do you do if you run a program in a country in Africa that is essentially not set up for Western-style bank transfers, and in which the regulatory requirements that Yale has are just not easy for people to do? So that's one instance of these kind of things. So we collected a lot of examples of those kind of things, have a committee that Kristina Talbert-Slagle here is on from the medical side of the campus. We have a bunch of faculty who run large international programs, so that the business office people on the committee hear the squeaky wheel and the first-hand comments that people have about what's getting in the way of their research and their international partnerships. And then we have the controller of the university, the head of procurement from the university, and others. And we came up with an initial list of 65 or so problem pain points, and then we prioritized them. And this semester and this year, we're starting to roll out what we hope will be some improvements. Finance is a slow-moving thing. It's a massive operation on campus, but people have been very collaborative and helpful with us so far. And I'll just tell you a few of the things we're trying to introduce. So one of them is a change in payments for small amounts of money, where previously it would require a wire transfer. And what we've done is set up business PayPal so that for small amounts of money, under $2,500, we are allowing people to use PayPal for Business for those. So this is a pilot this semester in the Macmillan Center and the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. And if it's successful, we'll be able to roll it out more. A second pain point that people often have is if you are setting up international wire transfers. At the moment, a lot of the information is collected manually by people. Your business office might collect one set of things, pass it on somewhere else. There's a lot of opportunity as it steps through these different steps in the process for mistakes to be made in terms of addresses, one missed digit, things like that. So we're rolling out a new vendor system at the end of the year in business that will allow individuals to enter a lot of the information themselves in their own language, because there are multi-language interfaces on this, which we think will reduce the level of complexity and opportunity for error along the way. And then a third instance of what we're trying to do is in terms of giving you a real individual, that if you hit 3 months and you still haven't reimbursed your colleague in Germany or wherever, who is furious that they haven't been reimbursed for their trip to Yale, one of the problems with the existing system is that if something is kicked back by business services, it then isn't escalated. It just drops to the bottom of the queue, and then you have to put an entirely new request in, and there's no way for them to tell what is a new request that really was first made 3 months ago, and what is a new request that's really a new request. So what we're doing now on the international business side is we have a real person's name at the bottom and an escalation email address, so that we have the opportunity as individual faculty members who are dealing with collaborators to say, look, you may think this is new, but it's not. This deserves escalation. And one of the problems for us in the past was you sort of put it out in the ether and you just don't know if anybody's actually reading on the other end. So these are 3 examples of things that we're trying to do. What we hope is that this is going to be an active international payments committee in the future, in which the names will be up, and you can contact us if there are other things that you're dealing with, so we can try and make progress on that continually, because all these things get in the way of your research and our relations with our international collaborators, and we want to try and solve those as much as we can, though it takes time. Carolyn.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you also for having us here today. It's really a privilege, and it was really inspiring to listen to the work that all of you are doing earlier today, and also to put faces with names. There have been a number of you that I've hoped to help in the past, and it was really fun to hear, hear about the larger picture. So what I'd like to talk about, let's see here. Here we go. I'm going to talk a little bit about the IOCC and the resources that we try to bring to the faculty, staff, and students at Yale to help you with international activities and getting things done, both from an operational standpoint and also in terms of navigating the compliance requirements that come up and make it much more complicated than it might otherwise have been. This is just a list of the different kinds of international activities, keeping in mind that, there are obviously global health programs, but there are a host of other kinds of things that we do internationally, and some of them are even here on campus. Hosting international visitors is one of them. This is just a small list of the different offices and committees that we have at Yale that have either a dedicated international person able to help with issues as they come up, or are focused specifically on international needs. And so I just want to run through what each of them does and encourage and provide some contact points for you, and also encourage you to reach out to them directly when needs come up. So let me start with the Office of the General Counsel, which is actually where I sit, even though my role is compliance. They provide guidance and advice regarding the regulatory needs that come up, laws. Their focus, of course, and their expertise is on U.S. law and what we need to do here in New Haven, Connecticut. And so, even though Alyssa Greenwald, whose email is down there at the bottom, is an expert on the U.S. side of things from an international perspective, she'll be the first to say that she does not know in detail the laws of all of the different countries in which we do work. And we often then have to reach out and engage counsel there. So every time an issue comes up, and we have to review the fact patterns of those particular issues and figure out what the possible resources are that we need to engage for you. She also provides help with the MOUs that Stephen mentioned before, figuring out how best to structure those, working closely with the Office of International Affairs, figuring out whether or not we have existing relationships with those entities already, and then how to work within that context to build the right agreement. We'd really encourage you, especially when you have issues that contain a legal element to them, to reach out to the OGC as early as possible. It's much easier to resolve a problem or overcome it or avoid it altogether if we know about it in advance, rather than having to fix it later on. The tax office is important. They, of course, their focus, again, like the OGC, is on U.S. taxes. That's where their expertise lies. But they're also a great resource for figuring out what the tax requirements are in the countries that we are working in elsewhere. And that can be really important, especially if we're placing individuals to work in other countries, or bringing people from other countries to work here, trying to avoid dual tax obligations and things of that sort. It also kicks in where Yale is doing something on the ground in another country, and we're trying to avoid Yale being considered a legal entity in that country, unless we actually have set it up that way, and where that could result in Yale having a tax obligation there. Again, reach out, please, as early as possible to the tax office if you have a tax issue. Office of Sponsored Projects. I'm sure you're all very familiar with the Office of Sponsored Projects. One of the ways in which we engage them to support you is in figuring out how the rules that come with the different kinds of funding, the awards that you have, affect our ability to do things overseas. So one of the issues that's come up recently, more recently, it has to do with getting prior approval, for instance, for foreign components on NIH awards. So when you reach out to us with a remote work arrangement, for instance, that involves somebody in another country, this is one of the things that we need to do, is engage OSP to figure out whether or not that's going to kick in, and how do we make sure that everything is in order so that we don't run into an issue. The Office of Export Controls, if you're bringing information or goods outside of the country or back into the country, they can be very helpful. Mark Stomsky is the person to reach out to there. I won't dwell here because Stephen's already done a really nice job talking about the expertise that we have in the Office of International Students and Scholars with respect to visas, and Office of International Affairs. And this brings us to a couple of committees, and I want to spend a little bit more time here. The International Research Programs and Activities Committee, and I heard a lot of acronyms earlier, so I felt like I was among my people. This is the IRPA committee. Stephen is one of the two chairs of this committee, and it's a high-level committee that was put in place several years ago to help address some of the policy level and oversight level risks and issues that came up, so that we had a place to bring thorny issues and challenges for discussion and review, and to try to figure out how best to resolve them and be able to move ahead. And then the international I'm sorry?
Carolyn, who chairs that committee?
That is chaired here by Stephen Wilkinson and also Mike Craer. Yep. The International Operations and Compliance Committee is where I want to spend more time. We are a cross-functional committee with representation from tax, HR, the Office of General Counsel, International Affairs, and a number of other parts of the university. Our job is to try to help faculty, staff, and students do the thing that they need to do in an international location, or where it's on campus and involves international people. What I really want to stress is that we want to help you make it happen. Our job is not to get in the way and say no. And so we've pulled together expertise from various areas and can pull in others as needed when you bring us an issue. So an example of one of these kinds of issues where you might say, hey, look, I'd like to bring in a postdoc fellow from another country to work here in my lab on campus. And from your perspective, maybe, it occurs to you, there's a visa issue here, I need to get OISS on board. But there are also, other issues that can kick in. The IOCC exists to try to identify all of those and pull in everybody at once, so it's not a sequential process of, first you identify one thing and then the next. In this case, there can be, if your lab is funded by an NIH award, we need to figure out whether or not there are any issues there related to disclosure, depending on whether the fellow is funded by some funding source outside that could be problematic. There could be tax support needed for figuring out what the individual's tax obligations are. There could be deemed export issues that we would call in the Export Controls Office to help us figure out, and also insurance and health-related issues as well. So the IOCC, that's an example of the sort of thing that the IOCC can do. And if you're not sure where to start when you have an issue and need some help, this is the place to reach out to. We have an email address, iocc@yale.edu. I monitor that on a daily basis. You can also reach out to me directly, please feel free, or to any of the people who are on the IOCC. I should probably try to name them, huh, Kristina? Oh, no. In any event, we also have a website, which is what is it now? world-toolkit.yale.edu. So I would encourage you to go there. And I think at this point, I'll hand it off to you, Kristina.
Okay. I wanted to, let's see. Yeah. So I wanted to start this part by telling you a little bit of history of how I came to be Oh, sorry, I wander. I'll try not to. How I came to be part of this. So I'm a faculty member in the School of Medicine, as folks who've been here since the morning already know, and I have the great fortune, the tremendous fortune, to work with partners in Liberia. My colleague, Dr. Bernice Don, right here. This is me. We were on a panel. This is when we launched a Center for Teaching, Learning, and Innovation at the University of Liberia College of Health Sciences. So I am not a Yale institutional capacity building person, or I wasn't, but now I hope I am a little. And the reason is because I was one of the squeaky wheels that Stephen was talking about. So I'm going to tell you why. This is where some of the challenges that faculty have experienced come up in real life, and to Yale's immense credit, when I started to say, hey, we had a challenge here, we had a challenge there, they said, well, you're with YIGH, let's bring people together, join the International Operations and Compliance Committee, and work with us. And then they invited me to join the International Payments Working Group. So I just want to give credit first to Yale itself and to the leadership here for saying, let's really solve problems together. Carolyn's right, that is absolutely the attitude. So I work with the team in Liberia. Oh, I can hear myself better now. I'll try to stay here. Okay. And I want to just tell you about the different ways that my work and our colleagues in Liberia have interfaced with Yale offices, and some of the ways that we've had challenges and some of the troubleshooting. So what you're seeing here is a picture of the Ministry of Health of Liberia. Those are two of my students on the left and right, and then one dear colleague of mine, Ibrahim Ajami, who was a Yale World Fellow, but he is a Liberian physician who did a lot during the Ebola crisis. We work very closely with the Ministry of Health and the University of Liberia, and there was talk after we really started to establish a robust partnership of developing and executing a memorandum of understanding. And so in order to do that, you have to work with the Office of General Counsel. And this was one of my first ways of interacting, and my husband is a lawyer, but I was daunted by lawyers, but they were great, super helpful. And Alyssa Greenwald is who Carolyn mentioned. She is so sharp and so aware of all the things you need to be thinking through. So they, whenever Yale needs to execute an agreement like this, you work with OGC. And some of my colleagues who are at other universities see their Office of General Counsel as a scary place where they say no first. That is not the case here at Yale. And Alyssa just even has seen these slides and thought of, you have to be careful of how much you show. I think it's okay to show this little snippet. So this is just an example of how the faculty work we're doing, the relationships we build, the connections we want to forge. We have to know who at Yale to approach and how to get their help so that we can make these things happen. So this one has a lot on it. This is, again, just a case study of some of the things that we've experienced. So in the past, we were funded by a few different funding sources, and we were able to hire some folks. So what you're seeing here in the middle is Africa, and then the little red country there is Liberia, just to orient you with where our partners are. We hired some postdoctoral teaching fellows from the sub-region in Africa to come to Liberia and teach. We were very excited about this. We hired them through a Yale grant. And so the two circles are showing two of our postdoctoral fellows. The one on the right, Stephen Nilekani, is from Nigeria, and Charles Odongo is from Uganda. They are Yale employees hired to live in Liberia on U.S. funding. So we had to figure out, what is their tax obligation? What is the employment arrangement? How do we set this up in ways that optimize the needs for them, that are compliant with Yale? So this was an area where we needed a lot of help from these various Yale offices. And then the person on the far left here, Dr. Angela Benson, is a senior, amazing physician in Liberia to whom we wanted to pay an honorarium for work she did with us for a strategic planning event. That's what you're looking at here. They're figuring out curriculum for the only medical school in the country. And it was really challenging to get that payment figured out and sent to Dr. Benson. It was $1,000, but as Stephen said, there were so many layers of documentation and paperwork and lots of compliance things. We had some hiccups there. Dr. Benson was a great sport about it, but it was challenging. And then actually a lot of these folks, this is everybody who participated in this strategic planning event, many of these folks received honoraria as part of their facilitation, rightly so. They're very senior, they're very busy, they brought a lot of expertise, and getting them paid was really challenging. Then this lower middle picture, the person on the left is a U.S. citizen whom we hire to live full-time in Liberia and work on a health management capacity building project. For a U.S. citizen on a U.S. grant, there are rules about, I'm afraid I'm going to say it wrong, so be careful, how many days you're in the U.S. versus you're not in the U.S. and whose taxes you pay. Do you pay in the country? Do you pay U.S.? This has all been like dawning realizations to me. You know, we write the grants, we propose the ideas, but we don't think about some of these execution behind the scenes operational issues. So figuring that out, we ended up working with the International Tax Office and others to figure out how to pay Frida Kumsen there and make sure that she didn't end up with a walloping tax bill at some point down the road because we didn't do something right. And then the thing on the far left is obviously a picture of the MasterCard. And our P cards for Yale are MasterCards, which just basically do not work in Liberia at all. So my joke that I'm sure my colleagues here are tired of me telling is that my P card in Liberia is great as a coaster and maybe if I need to pick a lock. And that's it. So we've had a lot of challenges with our business office. We need cash. It's a cash-based economy. And they are saying, we don't want to give you a lot of cash. We don't want your people in country to have cash. Can you please use your P card? And we're like, really? Honestly, we can't. So that kind of thing is nobody's fault, but it's been a real challenge with how Yale's systems work and then how to work within those systems to execute the programs in Liberia. So we actually, okay, so this is just, I'm going to take one more second here. This is a hotel in Liberia where we had an event. We had an agreement with the hotel. This is about the cash issue to reserve this venue for the strategic planning event that I showed you pictures from. We could not get the cash released to pay. We paid the down payment. We couldn't get the cash released quickly to pay the balance. Because it's a cash-based economy, the hotel owner was calling our team, where's the money, where's the money? And he was not able to pay some of his staff in time for Christmas because of what had happened on the Yale side. And that is a huge issue. Liberia, I mean, it's not, you know, I really want to be careful when talking about our partner countries not to continue these stereotypes and tropes. But it is a place where people don't necessarily have the resources that we have. And so not to pay people on time for Christmas is actually unacceptable anywhere. Doesn't matter where you are. So this is how I started to become a squeaky wheel. And I really didn't know they were going to invite me to be part of the solution, but I appreciate it so much. So when we were the implementing partner where we had to hire in country, buy things in country, reserve a venue, we ran into lots of these different challenges that have already been mentioned and alluded to, but I'm just telling you like directly, this is just me, one person in one country. And one thing I have come to appreciate is just the scale of these challenges at Yale. So if you've got me, frustrated faculty, squeaky wheel, there are hundreds and hundreds, I don't even know how many faculty we have, hundreds, many of whom are doing all kinds of international work. So this is really a big challenge at the level of the university. The one other thing I would say that just hasn't been said is the processes for getting people paid also sometimes involve bank fees a few steps along the way. So if you're paying someone a $250 honorarium, they might end up paying $50 in fees. And so now you've cut what you paid them by 20%, and Yale won't cover that. And that's not fair. So how do we deal with those kinds of issues? Okay. Oh, you have to click this twice. Oh, no, wait. Yeah, okay, so then we decided for our next grant to structure it differently. So we now have a $15 million USAID grant, 5-year grant. We have a huge team in country. And the way we've structured that is Yale is the prime, but a lot of the money goes directly to our partners in country so that they are doing the implementing and the hiring and the paying people and the buying stuff. And we thought, great, we've solved this problem. But by the way, this is Dr. Dawn. This is me when I was blonde, and this is my colleague Marie Martin at Vanderbilt. So we are the leadership team in this grant. I just want to make sure I say that. But then, of course, we came up with other things that are challenging. So our partners in country, the way most of these grants work is on a reimbursement model. So the recipient pays first, and then they invoice against that to get reimbursed. But that's predicated on the idea that you have the money in hand to pay first. Our partners in Liberia don't have that. So we need to figure out how to advance the funds to them so that they could do the work in a way that managed risk for Yale. And I really, again, will just applaud. I mean, I don't mean to do this in a self-serving way. It's legitimate. This is really hard for Yale to ask them to be moving funds outside of normal processes. Lisa Mosley has been super supportive, Stephen Wilkinson, Carolyn, and all of IOCC. And again, you know, we got into this situation without my knowing that this is what we were going to be asking of my employer. And they have been helpful, but it has been challenging. So these are some of the other things that we've needed help on. So what I have learned, and I want to do a mea culpa here because I have done a lot of complaining, hopefully respectfully, but I have. I'm sure you can tell, is that it's really important to come to IOCC early. One major regret that I have is that as soon as we got that $15 million grant, like that week, I wish I had called Carolyn and said, can we convene the people who are going to need to be supporting this work and start to figure out processes, and you all can tell me what I need to know. So that was my mistake. So I specifically just have Carolyn Marks on here. Just call her. She'll point you in the right direction. And then my business office, I'm in the Department of General Internal Medicine, and some of my faculty colleagues you've heard from today, but a lot of them do work entirely in the US, and a lot of them do work entirely in New Haven. So it's asked a lot of my own business office to try to figure out and troubleshoot these issues. So one other thing I've learned is that IOCC and I can help facilitate collaborations between folks based fully at Yale, used to Yale's rules and processes, used to working in the US, and find ways to forge connections to say, okay, here's how we do it here, and let's tweak it so we can still all follow the rules, but make it work in Liberia, in my case. And then this is just like a quote of IOCC. We should have it as our tagline. International is different. It just means you're doing anything international, just right off the bat, change your mindset. It's different. We're going to have to get creative. We're going to have to think about doing things in a different way. We're going to have weird conversations about taxes and who's living where and things that we weren't expecting. And then this is another lesson I would say for me, but also a lot of our colleagues here who model this and have helped me feel confident in this, which is politely and respectfully not take no for an answer. So one of the problems that was flagged of the 65 is this perception that Yale has a culture of no, saying no first. And that certainly is a perception. I mean, it came out in the survey, right? But that's not actually been my experience. My experience has been you think they're going to say no, or you didn't realize you needed to ask, but then once you ask, it is what Carolyn said, which is we are here to help you, and we're here to help you figure this out. So in my role now with YIGH specifically, I'm on the International Operations and Compliance Committee. Again, you know, they could have just said, okay, thanks for telling us the problems, Kristina, bye. But they didn't. They said, please join our committee. Let's work this out together. So kudos to the team who did that. And this group is amazing, and it has representation from all over. I have a slide on that. I had to do a lot of work with Office of Sponsored Projects in all the scenarios I described to you. And then the tax office, Sue Whitty and the team there. It's actually, just as a learner, it's just fascinating to talk to these folks and hear about the things that you have to think about when you're hiring people in other places, and where they're citizens, and where they live, and for how long. So anyway, these are just some of the offices. Yeah, and then this is the reason this is intentionally like scattered looking, because what I have realized is there is a huge cadre of people at Yale who are here to help us. And by the us, I mean faculty, I mean students, I mean trainees, I mean our partners. And I really only learned that by kind of asking, well, wait a minute, what do we do? Who do we talk to? So this is just to show you kind of a sense of all these different considerations. And then IOCC, the International Operations and Compliance Committee, is smack in the middle, connected to all these different offices, and they are really our go-to to start. So we are here, we wanted certainly, as has been said, to let everyone know about all of these resources and all the work, and this is a lot of behind the scenes, how can we make things work better. The title of this session is Demystifying Global Health at Yale, and we're really interested in this next batch of time that we have we are interested in hearing from you and having a facilitated Q&A and discussion. What have people encountered? What questions do you have, mostly from my colleagues? I mean, I'm happy to tell you more about the Liberia work, but this session is about how do we demystify these institutional and operational processes, so the experts are sitting down here front. So thank you very much for your attention, and we would really like to hear from you. Yeah.
Thank you, Kristina. I'm very impressed with the advocacy that you're doing to address all of this. Forget Liberia for a second. Let me tell you what happens when a Canadian comes to an American university to speak, okay? I've already given up on your honorarium. I'm not expecting to get it at all. I came to a well-known university on the east coast of the US. I won't tell you which one, but I bet you it applies to Yale too. Sorry. So they said, we'll give you an honorarium of $250. I said, fine. They first said, you have to become our vendor, our supplier.
Oh, yes.
I'm like, God, I'm not your vendor. I'm not selling you anything except my knowledge, perhaps. I said, fine. Then create an account in Workday, which is the worst software humanity has ever created, okay? Don't get me started on Workday. My blood pressure is going up. Then they said, register on the software called Sprint Tax for IRS. I did it. Then they said, upload your this document, bank document, did all of that. This is already probably 8 hours of my time, probably worth $3,000 already, okay? For $250, okay? I did all of that. Then they said, there is a form where you have to enter every time you entered and exited the United States of America for the last 20 years. I'm like saying, what the? Sorry. That's when I wrote a very polite email to them saying, take it as my gift to your beautiful university, give it to charity, because this juice is not worth the squeeze. Okay? In a very polite way. I had already probably spent $3,000 plus for $250.
Yeah.
Ever since that, I've already have a policy of declining honoraria. I wish I could say give it to Doctors Without Borders, give people a chance, because let that university not keep it. Because my cynical take on this, and my university is equally bad, if not worse, is that this is all intentional so that people give up. Right? This is like scores of dollars are being given up like this, because how many people have the ability to go through this torture?
Yeah, that's right.
Instead, maybe we should say, especially, I don't care about the $250, but if you had given me an option, give that $250 to charity, I would have clicked it in an instant and felt good about it. Right? For the effort that I put into that school, I'm happy that Doctors Without Borders or somebody got that money. Right now, it went to the same university, and I just gave up. Okay? And this is for a Canadian. I'm not even talking about what's happening to somebody in Liberia.
Right. Thank you.
I'm an internist with a long interest in healthcare quality management and especially hospitals. And what I just wanted to ask you anecdotally is, and the rule back in the 80s and 90s used to be any complex system is perfectly designed to achieve the results it has. Do other large universities, I'm sure they have the same issues, and is there any kind of an underground consortium where you can share with each other best practices across universities to make this better?
So yes, there are various Ivy Plus consortia of people on both the business office side as well as the Vice Provost Global side where we've discussed payments. I guess one thing I've learned is that Yale is not the only place with problems. My colleagues at other universities complain about many of the things that faculty and students and other scholars here at Yale complain about. I think personally that we make many small payments, like some of the ones that Kristina was talking about, and yet we apply some of the same risk management procedures that we do for very large ones, and that the setup overall in Yale is a sort of one-size-fits-all in terms of vendor setup and risk management. And one of the points we've been trying to make in this International Payments Committee is that, yes, we realize that fraud happens, but let's have multiple pairs of eyes and a less bureaucratic system for these kind of small payments. And that PayPal thing that we talked about is an example of what we're trying and make this a bit easier. But I'm not up here to defend this system, but I've also realized by speaking to the people on the business and the other side, they're good people and want to collaborate with us on fixing these things, but very often they're working in their own units and they aren't hearing about some of the kind of end problems that we're experiencing. And one of the productive parts of this has been bringing the faculty and other scholars in contact with them to say, here's why it makes sense for you, but here's all the problems it creates for us. And that's new news sometimes for them.
In the 13 years that I've been at Yale, you hear stories from individuals along these lines come through. But until you begin to gather together a group of people who can speak to the, with their own experiences and communicate that directly to the people who are sitting in their offices trying to make these systems work, that's when you start to get traction for change.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Thanks so much for really helpful, and it really did what it said on the tin of demystifying the process here at Yale. I was just wondering, you gave a great example of expenses, payments escalating after 3 months. Within the Office of General Counsel, as someone who has had to have multiple data transfer agreements, material transfer agreements with international partners, sometimes they can take a very, very long time, like years. When I've spoken to colleagues, they've said that, expect a minimum of a 6-month, kind of review process at OGC. I'm just wondering, a little bit like the expenses example that you gave, is there any monitoring of the time taken for these contracts that then they can be escalated after a certain time frame? And if there was that monitoring, could that then be used to advocate for increased funding for OGC, just to ensure that they have the support that they need?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. If you send me details of how long things have taken, I'm very interested in collecting those kind of details, because maybe we need additional capacity in the way that you're talking about. I think with the business side, they do a lot of things with Salesforce, I think. And so one of the, which is very good at parsing out emails when they all come in the business office, and then they're assigned to individuals. But the problem is their count of days only starts from a new request. And so if you kick it back, then it's a new request again. And they don't see that this represents 3 months of frustration for you and your collaborators elsewhere. So that's why we try to build in this escalation process now with an Ask International, I think, maybe you remember the exact email, so that it goes to people who have a little bit more experience with international stuff, because not everybody within the large office that distributes all the finance stuff is necessarily familiar with international or knows the people in Carolyn's office or elsewhere that they need to contact in order to figure out, okay, can we pay this person under Yale and international rules in this kind of way? So I think training more people within the business office and international is helpful, but there isn't an OGC equivalent of Salesforce that says how long since the beginning of the request. There isn't a tracking system that I'm aware of that does that. It's a good point.
We don't have a tracking system in the OGC. On the other hand, part of what we're trying to do is have a personal face, so that. Sure. Is this working? It is. Okay. We're trying. I think the OGC generally has been trying to avoid having that kind of electronic interface, so that you can reach out directly to an individual. And for something international, if you feel like you're running into those sorts of delays, please email me. And I can help move things forward as well. It is, in many cases, it's a problem of manpower.
Can I just say one quick thing about that? This one is still on? On these data use and data service agreements, I have heard people talk about trying to standardize the actual agreements, because a lot of times the language is the same. we would need to talk to our colleagues in OGC about, there may be a very good reason that that hasn't already been done. But this is where, like Carolyn said, just getting folks together who know it on the faculty side and why it's, you know, whatever our needs are, and then talk to the folks on the other side about what their needs are. Sometimes we come up with something that is a pretty good solution that really necessitated both coming together. I know we don't have a lot of time. Anybody?
Thank you guys so much. I feel like all of these scenarios really, you know, bring memories of very specific people and individuals that I've been, you know, trying to work with. Carolyn, I want to say thank you so much. I feel like there have been so many emails where, you know, I've brought up a scenario and you've connected me to different resources to address obstacles. And there is one point Kristina brought up, which is so true, which is my business staff in rheumatology, you know, there's the admin assistant, there's a business manager, there's the HR, and then their colleagues, they're very unfamiliar with this. And so, you know, learning that cycle, and then when the staff turn over,
Yes.
then they have to relearn, the new folks have to relearn it, and that's a very time-consuming process. One thing that's helped a lot are those sessions your office holds. I think, I don't know if it's quarterly or periodically, so I'm not sure if everyone gets on that mailing list, but sometimes my admin will say, okay, I'm going to go to this because this sounds like it addresses it. So that kind of resource, or that kind of, or if you are going to increase the staff with expertise that they can directly go to, I think is really critical, because I feel like every certain number of months or years, I'm going through that process again with the new, business manager, or, and they're fantastic and they're super enthusiastic, but they just don't do this every day.
Yeah.
Those are really complicated rules, right? So there is an international payments training that takes place on a quarterly basis, and we also have international forum sessions for staff, usually on an annual basis, where we try to provide training and resources to staff to help especially new people, but even people who've been here before. Every international payment situation that comes along seems to be like a unique situation, right? You get a different fact pattern, and all of a sudden, the thing that you thought you could do before doesn't apply to this when you have to learn something new. And so that's one of the reasons why we have that particular training going on a regular basis. And what I would say is, if you go to world-toolkit.yale.edu, there is a place in the upper menu where your staff can subscribe to our mailing lists, and we'll get regular announcements as to what training is coming up and how to register for it.
Sunil, before we come to you, I think Michael just wanted to follow up on this particular issue. Can we just give him the mic? Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on something Evelyn said, and to let Stephen know that I think the way forward on this issue, in the medical school alone, there are 30, 40 departments. The School of Public Health has 6 departments, nursing, et cetera. There are probably 40 to 50 business offices in the health science campus. One of the things that we've sort of come to feel would be useful is if we could actually embed pre- and post-award people who would otherwise, one of their 30 grants that they manage is an international grant. If we could embed a couple FTEs within the Institute who would serve all of the health sciences, there would be a lot of money saved, because those people would actually know that direct person to reach out to in the main campus, banking office, et cetera. And I think there's a way to even make that sustainable through some sharing of indirect costs, because many of us in some clinical departments, Evelyn probably has this as well, she may be the only person that her business office contact who does international work. And that person just doesn't have the time, aside from the turnover issue. So something that we've sort of wanted to propose is the idea that that's a service that YIGH could really serve, that I don't think would cost any more than what's currently being spent to hire or to staff business offices. So I just wanted to make that point, because it is a consistent issue that's come up.
Yeah, I think a critical mass of expertise is really key. In the Macmillan Centre that I'm in, all that we do is international. So we have a business office with around 10 people in it, and they do international stuff every day. And they know exactly who to contact in all the other departments around campus. that can help when you deal with all the kind of trouble issues that have come up otherwise. And the problem you're describing is that that level of a core group that's actually familiar with this and knows who to contact on the rest is just not present. And it would be great if each unit had one or two people, definitely not just one, because as we've said, people retire, they leave, they do other things and build up some redundancy, so you have a bit more expertise spread more generally. So
Stan's had his hand up for a little while. I'm sorry I didn't see you, and then we'll come to you, Stan. We have about 5 more minutes.
Just about 3 or 4 people ago, there was a question about universities coordinating and learning best practices from one another. There is the Consortium for Universities for Global Health, and they have a Global Health Operations Committee, which has been very effective over the years at doing precisely that. So the University of Washington had a problem, they solved it such and such way, they then come and share it with Yale University and Emory University. So what I've noticed in that process is that there is some difference between private and public universities. There are all sorts of state laws and regulations that govern public universities that do not apply to us. But the private universities often find that the solutions for one can often be the solution for others. Mm-hmm. Now, when we founded CUGH about 15 years ago, this was a major motivator, and many universities have sung the praises of this best practices sharing process, which does have a little bit of a wrinkle for health issues. So clinical projects like PEPFAR and clinical research that involves human subjects, which may not apply to some of our other international projects. So if Yale is not participating in this particular group, it would be wise to do so, I think.
Well, first I want to say that the PayPal development is fantastic, and for those small amounts of payments, they may be small, but for our colleagues and collaborators there, it is hugely impactful. And I mean, every few months I have a story of colleagues that we work with who haven't been able to pay, a driver that was needed for a brief visit or an extra technician, and they don't get paid for 3-4 months, which is their entire livelihood. So it's fantastic. Thank you for that. The other thing, inspired by Madhu's presence here and his discussion of how we may impact some of the visa practices by coming together. Another issue is just I feel like there's a lot of challenges external to Yale from the government side that are making our work more challenging. Recently, we may be awarded a grant from the NIH for a study for a grant in West Africa. In process of even before we get the notice of award, we have 8 key personnel in that country. The NIH is requiring every one of them to submit their contract for any other grant that they have with any other institution, European Union, everything, has to be translated into English. The dollar amounts have to be present. That has to be submitted to the NIH. I feel embarrassed to ask them to do that, but we can't get the grant unless they do it. I'm wondering if there's some collective way that we can write to someone or come together to try to, there's a tide that feels like making it more difficult for us to do the work. But I feel like such a small cog in this wheel, not sure exactly what to do to try to advocate to help make changes.
Yale, together with other research universities across the nation, is already pushing back when regulations are proposed. And some of that has been successful. There was a thing that was put in early record about a year and a half ago, and as a result of universities pushing back on this kind of subcontract reporting, those initial requests were, or those initial policies were actually revised quite substantially. So Yale and the other universities are pushing, but that doesn't mean we're successful all the time. I guess our office, OGC, you can tell us about things, and we will try and tell our Office of Government Relations that this is something that's been coming up with us, and they will discuss with the other university people whether this is something that's widespread, and we can try and push back in that way. But none of us have complete control over the stuff that comes down, even though we all recognize it's the individual researchers and their partners who are feeling the cost of this.
One more? Okay.
Thank you so much. I just want to echo all the thanks for the fantastic work that you're doing. From a capacity building standpoint, is Yale or does Yale have resources to support organizations in other countries who are becoming sub-recipients for the first time?
Well, do you want me to say something first? Okay. So I have had this conversation a few different times with folks at Yale. We certainly have very strong in-house capacity on lots of this. We, in our work in Liberia, are building that into some of our funding proposals because we recognize that allowing our partners to be able to receive, manage, and eventually issue their own grants is crucial to capacitating them to be fully independent research and implementation science partners. So I would just say to you that's a conversation that's happening, and maybe several of us could come together. This is something I could also imagine YGH helping at least minimally to convene around, if not more, because this is certainly also about equity. The fact that we have so many resources behind us, even though I have complained, we are very lucky. And we would like to do that for our partners as well. So that would be what I would add on that from the YIGH standpoint. I don't know if either one of you want to say any more.
Yeah, at the moment, as Kristina says, it's done through the individual products and the individual collaborations, and there isn't a larger policy or pot of resources or people who can help with training that can do this university-wide for all collaborators. Mm-hmm. Although it's an important point for the reasons you and Kristina have pointed out.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everyone. This has been a great discussion. Let me hand it over to Michael Konechny. Sorry, Mike. I don't know why I called you Michael. To wrap us up.
Thanks, Kristina, Stephen, Carolyn, for a great session.